Hello, welcome to day 14 of the 30 for 30 YouTube challenge, where my friend Alex and I, sincerely Alex Vinay, are uploading 30 YouTube videos in 30 days of May. Now, this next video is a throwback. This is the first ever interview that I conducted on camera for my children's book brand. Now, this is a work in progress. I've not launched any of my books yet, but I am continuously getting feedback. So bear with me as you stumble or watch me stumble through my first ever interview about children and the emotional intelligence that parents can instill. Thank you, Annalise Anderson, the amazing guest that I had, who prepared with me, allowed me to chatter and get to know her parenting style. So, enjoy.
Okay. I am terrified of birds. I really am. It's like the disgust has like I'm so disgusted by them it becomes a fear. Like with the pigeons, when the pigeons come up to us at the park, I'm like, "Ugh." Yeah, it's really challenging for me.
Paint us a mental picture of your background as an actress and a writer.
Sure. Well, when I went to undergrad, I was playing volleyball and then I quit because I wasn't passionate about it. And everybody else seemed to be. And sometimes I regret that. But I switched majors a lot. I wasn't sure what I was into. I liked a bunch of different things. And then my last year in college, I somehow on a whim auditioned for a play after taking an acting class that was an elective. And I ended up playing this part of Gwen in this play called 5th of July by Lanford Wilson. And I loved it. And it was the first time that I ever felt a sense of like, oh, like uh, I I fit in with these people. And by these people, I mean theater people. Um, so since then, right after that, I ended up going to graduate school for acting, especially because it was like I was new to the world, so I wanted more time in that world, and I was so intoxicated by it. So I went to NYU for acting. I walked into the auditions there, and I was very scared to move to New York, but I did, and I got my MFA. And then, is this, how much do you want to know about this? Do you want me to keep going? And then I started to work professionally, both in New York and LA. My reps out of school were bi-coastal. So I was working in New York and Los Angeles. And I've continued to do theater and film. I spend over the past like 15 years that I've been working professionally, in the times that I don't have jobs or auditions, I have spent a lot of time writing, teaching myself the craft of writing specifically for film and TV, and also working in volunteer grief support. So that's how I would like those are my main bullet points. I also had like a hiccup in the garment industry where I started a clothing line that did pretty well, but I like couldn't stand the industry. It was not for me. I'm so impressed by people and what they do in fashion, the art of it and the speed of it and the business of it, but it was not for me. Yeah.
And you are still acting and writing
Yeah.
today. You're working on a play, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in a Steve Martin play right now called Meteor Shower, and it's so fun. It's great. And it's been a really perfect way to spend some of this now over strike climate, acting strike climate. Yeah.
How is it for you working on that play as well as being a mom of three?
Um, it's convenient in that this play has rehearsed mainly at night, so most of the time I've been able to be with the kids, and then at least put the baby down and then hustle over to rehearsal. That being said, my husband has definitely picked up a lot of slack, for I don't know, what do you call it, slack? He's definitely done a lot more bedtimes than he usually does, that's for sure. And then on the weekends, when I've had rehearsals during the day on the weekends, he has a lot to do. Yeah.
Do your children have a sense of what you do?
Yeah, they do. And this has actually been one of the first times they've been able to witness it in person because, like when I've done TV shows and films, they get to see the result of it, but they haven't been on set. And though this play that I'm in now is like very adult, I figured out a way for them to come to a bit of the tech rehearsal, which is more of what's called like a cue to cue rehearsal. So it kind of glazes over the adult content of it. And they thought that was really cool. Um, and I thought this was so interesting, actually. Vigo, who is my middle boy, who's 4, he said to me after tech rehearsal when I came home a few hours later, Dave had brought them over for a total of about like 20 minutes. And when I came back, Vigo, like I'm standing in the doorway and Vigo goes, "Oh, you're here." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I was waiting for you." I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I thought you were dead." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, they were calling you a different name." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And then I like remembered a couple days before he had been playing a game where he was called Bebop. He was like, "My name's Bebop." And I said to him, I was like, "Remember when you were Bebop, but you were still Vigo, right?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he like got that. And then when he sees me in like hair and makeup now, before I go to the theater, he says, "You look like an actress." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah."
That's special to be connected with him on that level with this piece, whereas you've been doing this work for a long time and haven't had those conversations before. That
Yeah.
must feel nice.
Yeah, it is. And it's sweet because they've seen me do plenty of auditions.
Mm.
Since COVID, almost everything is a self-tape, which I do at home. And they both like, even when Dave, my husband, and I have like heated conversations now, Johanna, my girl who's 6, she'll say, "Is this an audition or real life?" Which is sweet.
That is very fun. Are there hobbies that you have time for outside of your acting, writing, and parenting?
Hobbies. What's considered a hobby?
Activities for leisure.
TVs for leisure. I mean, my number one favorite thing to do is go to the movies. So I don't know if that's leisure. To me, it feels spiritual when I like am in a dark theater and then things start. I almost always am very emotional. Uh, I don't know why, but I would guess that would be if I have like a chunk of time. That's usually what I'll do.
Do you enjoy kids' movies? Do you watch a lot of movies with your kids?
I take them to the movies, and I show them movies at home, like both classic movies and like current movies. But
Hmm.
when I'm watching a kids movie, unless it's a classic one like Wizard of Oz or something, I kind of just zone out. I just daydream. And I'll like try and pick out whose voices they are, like for the voiceover artists. Like I'm trying to like place them without looking it up. But for the most part, I just kind of zone out.
And those classic movies, what do you consider age-appropriate classic movies for a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old?
That's a good question. Well, I think Wizard of Oz is one. Um, I've done Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Gene Wilder Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Um, Sandlot, which has like some sort of like questionable moments, but overall, I think it's great. Um, what else? They've seen some foreign films, some like foreign animated anime films that have been cool for them to see. Uh, what else? Alice in Wonderland. Yeah.
Those are absolute classics. I couldn't agree more. I wonder what age I saw those films, but I feel as if every time I rewatch them, they have more meaning. So being a kid watching them and then an adult, that'll be cool that they've had so much exposure.
Yeah, every time you watch something, you see it with a different perspective.
You had mentioned your husband doing more bedtimes when you have big jobs going on. Can you talk a little bit about the parenting split in your household currently or in the past of how you and your husband balance different needs of your kids and your time?
Um, yeah, so it's never been anything that we've had like a clear conversation on where like I do this and you do that. It's really more of like a day-to-day thing, like what's needed in that particular day. Um, Dave's office currently is very close to the house. So like if I'm busy or if I have something going on, I can say like, hey, can you pick up Johanna from school? But I mean, I would say I do a lot of like the activity registration. I do a lot of the like school research. I do a lot of the like play. I do all of the play date organizing. Um, and we joke that he's in charge of sports, but like I end up being like, oh, basketball registration's happening and stuff like that. Um, I guess some parents have a more clear definition of like what who's responsible for what, I guess, but I don't know. I it's hard to answer questions like that because it's constantly in motion and shifting and changing day to day. You know what I mean? Morning to morning even.
Absolutely. Seems
Yeah.
like you're more finding a balance than creating norms, which I think is awesome. And probably where he has the more maybe traditionally masculine sense of being a former NFL player, and you are very artsy and talented in these other ways, it probably seems natural to pick up those different, like you saying he is in charge of sports, but you're still doing basketball registration. It's
Yeah.
interesting to hear how things like that shake out.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, that being said, he also like created a beach gymnastics program for them that he does like on the beach on the weekends. And he always, since they were babies, when he goes to put their diaper on at night before he puts their PJs on, he'll do like hand to foot and then cross opposite hand, opposite foot, and then same side to stimulate the neural pathways. So like he's very aware.
It's very interesting. I've never heard of a
Yeah.
parent doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
I would love to ask you specifically about motherhood. I am in awe of mothers. I think y'all really do it all. And there are tons of learnings I'm sure that you've made before, during, and in the future that you'll learn even more. But could you pick out one specific learning about being a mother that either surprised you or came to you as very impactful?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. Um, well, this sounds funny, but I mean it. I I I never thought about how much time would be dedicated and effort would be dedicating to feeding my kids.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of time. Like, what are we having for dinner? I need to go grocery shopping. What are they having for breakfast, lunch? It's a big time and effort unit. And to a mom that's already a mom, you'd be like, well, yeah, obviously that's like what it is. But that was news to me. I was like, I never thought about that. Like, oh yeah, I thought about like, oh, you'll have to wake up in the night when they're sleeping, when they're learning, when they're babies, stuff like that, or like you need babysitters. But I never thought of the actual unit of time that was going to be necessary every day to feeding the kids and preparing to feed the kids.
That makes perfect sense to me. because as a 20 something, I'm okay with a piece of avocado toast in the morning and maybe a coffee in the afternoon. Whereas you have three souls that you're trying to feed healthy and nutritious meals. So, what sort of preparation or where do you feel like most of that time actually goes, if not the dishes?
Um, I mean, it's all divided. So there's like the actual amount of time it takes to prepare like the breakfast. So for example, this morning the kids had oatmeal that I add a protein powder to, and like figuring out what protein powder was best for them and one that they liked. And that, for the record, this morning was at like 5:05 in the morning because Dave, my husband, left for a flight at 4:45 in the morning, and the kids woke up because either the alarm was too loud or like they heard him walking down the stairs, and so that's when they were hungry. And then always I dread the like 4:30 hour because I'm like, what am I gonna do for dinner? Like, what am I making? Sometimes what's tricky about my family right now is that there are some things Johanna will eat. She's usually more willing to try new things. Vigo's a little more narrow in his palate, which I think maybe could be because he was like a COVID baby and he was raised at a time when we were really doing a lot of the same things every day because he was born in October of 19. So 4 months later, right when he was starting solid foods, we were doing pretty much the same thing every day. And I'm sure he had like a variety of foods nonetheless, but like sometimes I feel like energetically, maybe he just felt that sort of like sameness. Because in California, at least, I mean, things were shut down for half a year, which was more than his life had been so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, the
Yeah.
differences
Yeah.
between the two just
Yeah.
because of that circumstance.
And he's getting a lot better at that now. Like I always give him kudos when tries something new. He doesn't have to eat it, but just when he tries like a bite of it, that's a real win. Um, and he does it, and he does. It's he's getting he's getting better and better at it.
If all three of your kids were in the room with you right now, what would they be doing?
Vigo would be looking at a book. He's almost always looking at a book, some of which were given to him by his beloved Aunt Sunny. His favorite books are from her. He doesn't know how to read, but he loves looking at books. He'll come home from school and look at books for anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours. Uh, so that's what he would be doing. Roscoe would either be throwing, he's one, would either be throwing a ball or stacking stuff up or hitting something. And Johanna would likely be drawing. She loves to draw.
Very self-sufficient, it sounds like. They all have their own activities that they're very interested in, which is wonderful. Probably.
I don't know if I say self-sufficient, but they do. I have done my best to foster independent play. That was a conscious decision with Johanna, and then since then, that's just been sort of like how our house goes. And that was part of some books and some classes I took that gave me that sort of awareness to do that.
Let's talk about those books.
Yeah.
What literature inspired you in your style of parenting today?
Yeah, when I was pregnant with Johanna, I had jury duty. And I remember like last minute, I was like, oh, I should um, take a book with me to jury duty. And I don't remember how I ended up with this book in my house. I want to say one of my friends from the gym had mentioned it and I had ordered it, but not paid too much attention. I'm sure I'm not the only one who just like orders books on a whim and then are like, I should read this, right? So I brought it and I read it. It's called REI, REI, Respectful Infant Education, written by Magda Gerber. And it just discussed her approach to child rearing, which I could be butchering this, but I'm pretty sure what it was is Magda Gerber and Emmy Pickler in Hungary noticed that the kids in the orphanages were more resilient and self-sufficient and healthier than the kids from the upper income families. And what they realized was happening is that the kids in the orphanages were permitted to do things by themselves, move their own bodies, and learn mechanically how to move in space without aid, because there were 8 of the babies and 1 caretaker, give or take, of course. And so they started to observe and realize that when babies and young kids are given safe spaces to explore, and both exploring their own bodies and their spaces, they learn faster and more effectively how to play independently, walk, climb, use tools, drink from a cup, things like that. And so it's kind of all based in that. And that was in like the 1940s or something. I honestly, now you're like, I'm getting the weeds there. I want to say like maybe the 40s, 50s, let's say the 50s. And then that methodology, Magda came over to America at some point. And then my RI teacher, Harry Gerbler, she was a student of Magda's in Los Angeles in the 80s, I think, when Magda was in her 80s as well. So yeah, it was probably the 40s when she was working in Hungary. Yeah.
That's brilliant, and it sounds like proven method over many decades. What part of the respect piece do you implement with your kids? What does that mean to you?
I can tell you something that exemplifies the opposite of it, I think, most effectively. I had a dentist, a pediatric dentist, speak to me over my middle son, Vigo, who at the time was 3. She was sitting on one side of the dental chair and I was sitting on the other. And she spoke over him as if he couldn't hear, as if he didn't understand English, as if he, I don't know, what was not a real person. And that to me is like a personified example of not respecting a kid. I have always talked to them like they understand me, even if they might not get the vocab word. I think it goes back to, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? Because I can say like, thank you, or I can say like, thank you, and it's you're like, okay, you understand, even though you might not get the vocabulary word. So I've just always done that. And to me, I think that's what respecting your kid is that they understand more than they can communicate even.
You shared a special tidbit with me yesterday about a tip for when you bring your baby home from the hospital.
That's like a RI thing. She talks about when you bring the baby home, if you didn't have the baby at home, because a lot of people do, I suppose, but when the baby arrives home, you give the baby a tour of the house in the same way you would if a friend came over for the first time, because this is where they live now. And it makes me emotional. Like, what? Hey, like, you live here with us. Let's show you around. Yeah.
That's so special.
Yeah, it really is. Like, the 3 days that my kids were born were the first, by far, my favorite days. Yeah.
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
And a great piece of advice. Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, just asterisk, not my idea. Definitely came from a quite accomplished childhood development expert.
Well, I very much appreciate you sharing it here and with me because it's going in my notes for the future. Talk to me about a very specific situation. I'd like to know when you're driving in the car with all three of your kids,
Yeah.
what are you listening to?
Great question. In our household, most often it is what's called Circle Round, which is a collection of folk tales from around the world put on by WBUR Boston, which is a channel NPR affiliate. They are Rebecca Shear and Eric Shamalonis produced them. They're a married couple who live in Massachusetts. They have a son. I think what happened is they started to record these stories for their son. I don't know how it started, but that my kids love circle rounds. They're beautiful folk tales from Africa, Hungary, Venezuela, all around the world that have different actors voicing the characters and musical instruments arranged by Eric Shamalonis. I took all three of the kids when Dave was out of town to a live recording they did when they were on tour over at the NPR KPRW space in Santa Monica. It was like them seeing Elvis. They were like so pumped. It's great. So usually that, if not that, if Vigo gets to pick the music, he almost always picks James Brown or Raffi. Those are his two, which are pretty far on the spectrum. And Johanna loves Beyonce. And Roscoe doesn't have an opinion that I can tell just yet, but he likes to dance, that's for sure. It's really cute.
It sounds like Johanna has great taste, as well as Vigo and Roscoe. I'm glad that you mentioned some music as well, but I've always been curious. Recently, I was with my little sister. We were playing golf. She's 16, and she told me I needed to turn off my millennial EDM. So now I'm just very self-conscious about what kids are listening to these days and what we're supposed to be playing. But I think folk tales is absolutely a wonderful option that I had never considered.
Yeah, yeah. It's they love them, and they help with. I mean, I never thought about it. I just listen to them because I think they're beautifully done, and I don't know, but I'm sure that they help with like language and apprehension and all that. They must, right?
They must.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back to your style of parenting, and I'm curious about any advice that you have or any practices that you practice for peaceful conflict resolution.
Okay, well, that's definitely a question that I think it's first most important to realize, remember, or learn that young kids are very dysregulated when they're upset. So they're in like a fight or flight, like some parenting experts call that like a lizard brain and a wizard brain. So when a young kid is very upset, their prefrontal cortex is like fire, right? It's like you can't have a peaceful conflict resolution. What you can do, as long as you, the parent isn't triggered, which is its own whole thing, you work to calm things down and get to a place where they're not in a fight or flight, right? That's like what a tantrum is, basically. When you hear it, like a kid has a tantrum, that's yeah. So that's one piece of that. A good example of, I think, what you're asking is the other week I was late to rehearsal, or I wasn't late to rehearsal, but I was going to be late to rehearsal. And I didn't have time to make myself dinner. And I was really hungry. And I had told the kids that we needed to leave the park. And they asked for like 10 more minutes, 10 more minutes, 10 more minutes, which is like totally normal. And because I was hungry, when I was leaving the house, almost late for rehearsal, I said, well, I didn't have time to make myself dinner. I told you guys that's why we had to go. And then I left, right? And that's something that I would only say to them because I was snappy and like hangry. And we talk a lot about like how um I'll always use myself in as example. I'll be like, God, when I'm hungry, I get angry. And the kids will say, Mom gets grumpy when she's hungry. And they'll notice for themselves what happens to them when they're hungry, when they're hungry. So like Johanna is quick to tear, quick to cry, like something like she'll drop her shoe and she's just like, "Ah," and I'm like, oh, okay. And she'll like notice. And I don't talk about it then. We talk about it later after she's eaten,
Mm.
because you don't want to, when they're in their lizard brain, when that's not the time for like a teaching moment. And also you can imagine like if your mom said that to you when you're crying, you're like, are you hungry? You're like, go F yourself, like that's like not the time. So my point being, when I was driving to rehearsal after I had eaten something in the car, and by eaten something, I mean a bag of beef jerky and like a little thing of trail mix, which was what my dinner was on the way to rehearsal, I called Johanna. I got on the phone with her and I said, hey, I was just thinking about how I said, this is why we needed to leave the park. I didn't get to make myself dinner. That's why you guys have to listen to me when I say it's time to go. And I'm sorry. I shouldn't have blamed you for that. It was my fault. And I was just hungry. And that's why I said that. I'm sorry I said that. And Johanna said, she said, thanks, Mom. And I'm sorry for, and she said something like she had called me like I can't remember what she had called me, but something like, I don't like you. She was mad. She said something like, I don't like you, like something of those in that regard, which comes at me often. And she said, and I'm sorry that I said, I don't like you. I was like, thanks. I appreciate that. And I was like, I love you. And I was like, I love you. Good night. We hung up the phone. Yeah.
Well, let me get this straight. You had a very, very typical moment with your children surrounding them needing to follow your directions for a very specific purpose of you regulating your own body. You made a comment on the way out, it stuck with you, and you actually called your 6-year-old on the phone to unpack that.
Yeah. I called, for the record, she doesn't have a phone. I called my husband. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what like some parenting experts call repair, right? Um, I think, I guess I don't think about it too much, but I know that they're capable of understanding things like that and reflecting. And what it did in that moment, which was really cool, is it modeled for her that people make mistakes and you can apologize, especially when they're hungry.
What do you think she's going to be like at 18 years old with these types of skills?
Oh God, I have no idea.
Awesome. She's going to be
Yeah,
awesome.
I hope so. I hope so. I want her to feel, I kind of had like when I was pregnant, I was trying to think of like 3 adjectives for like my kids, what I wanted them to be. And I think everything kind of goes under the umbrellas of capable, confident, and empathetic. Everything else can, I think, kind of float under those 3.
That's fantastic. I'm very inspired by that. And I can think of 100 instances where I wish my parents had just picked up the phone and said, hey, we were both in a moment and I want to unpack that with you. I think that will have very valuable outcomes for your child and for
And
your
it's never too
parent-child
late.
relationship.
It's never
Yeah.
too late for that, right? Like if your mom or dad, whatever you're thinking of right now, if they called you tomorrow and said that, even though that would have happened when you were 6, would it be meaningful?
Yes,
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah.
But as a 6-year-old feeling empowered, I can't imagine how
Yeah.
she felt after that conversation and then got to go back and play and be a kid
Yeah.
again
Yeah,
and
I hope so.
have all that respect. That's really wonderful.
I hope so. Okay, I'm just gonna move here. Go ahead.
You've
Okay.
already touched on some of the ways that you are instilling emotional intelligence in your children, and I'm excited to see them become thriving adults. Are there really specific processes or ways that you help them manage big feelings?
Uh, by not trying to stop them. I think that would be the short of it. Whatever it is, the hack of it is to let them have it and just to hold the space for them. Because I don't want my 4-year-old screaming and crying. Like, I'm not happy about it, but actually the fastest way for it to stop is to let it happen. It is actually like the hack. Um, at least with my kids. I just want to like asterisk that I'm not a parenting expert, but I can just tell you anecdotally what works for me is trying to stop it is not effective. Also, and Dave jokes about this, I am very structured with their sleep because almost everything to me hinges around being hungry or tired or having to poop. But also adults, but like kids, like if they are tired or hungry, or if they have to go to the bathroom, like that's, or if they haven't gone to the bathroom, meaning if like they're constipated, it's all 90% of it is like all right there.
I'm so happy you mentioned sleep. That's
Yeah.
very, very important throughout our lives, but certainly as children to get those habits right, along with the other things that you mentioned. So I'm glad that you have those, you publicized those here.
Yeah.
I am very invested in the positives of parenting, and I would love if you have an anecdote you'd want to share, something funny from your moments of parenting or you as a child, something that makes you giggle when you think about it.
Let's see, something that makes me giggle. Oh, the other day we were at the breakfast table. So it's like, let's say it's 6:30 in the morning. And we were talking about one of Johanna's friends having a little bit of trouble with a subject in school. And I was like, yeah, he'll get a tutor and that'll help him. And Vigo, while looking at his little book, which he almost always is, goes, like, doesn't even look up and he goes, tutor. He just goes, tutor, which was great. Never thought of that.
That is some good levity for 6:30 in the morning. Thank you, Vigo.
Yeah.
Okay, and now that we know that you're the perfect parent, I would love to hear from you. Are there any parenting trends that concern you in any way or you see and you're just like, oh, I really don't like that when parents do that certain thing?
I want to say two things to that. One is everyone is doing what they can at every moment that is different, right? Like, for example, like when I was super hungry and in a rush, I did the best I could in that moment. And I didn't handle it well. And that is true for everyone all the time. It's not a constant, it's always changing, right? Like, what are the given in acting? We talk about like, what are the given circumstances? I'm in a rush, I'm hungry, I've been with the kids all day, my husband was late to come take over for me. So these are all the given circumstances. So when I say something biting to my 6-year-old, that's why, right? Also on top of that, just to go even further back and to make myself an example, working and pursuing my goals are something that's deep within me as a response and reaction to the way I was brought up, right? So that being said, with that in mind, what annoys me at the park, at schools, at play dates, whatever, is what I call like performance parenting, where the mom or dad or caretaker, nanny, whatever, babysitter, who, grandma, whoever it is doing this performance parenting, which includes something like to this 13-month-old. Johnny, tell Betty Sue that you're sorry because he took a shovel away. Say you're sorry, whatever. I call it performance parenting because I know that that baby is not sorry. I know that that baby doesn't know what sorry is. I don't expect a baby to know what sorry is. I'm not upset at the baby. And I think that this parent thinks that I think that that baby should apologize to my baby, which is not the case. Anything that's performance based, meaning like a parent doing parenting for other parents, that to me is like not necessary. And I just um I try to let the kids exist where they are at that particular moment in their development, you know?
How do you respond when a little tiff happens between your child and another child and you don't
Sure.
want to be a
Yeah,
performing parent?
it's so dependent on age, first of all.
Mm.
Like, are we talking about a 10-month-old? Are we talking about a 2-year-old? Are we talking about a 6-year-old, right? Um, everything I've learned for the little kids, I would base that on what I learned in like the RIE classes, which for like Roscoe, my 1-year-old, I would get real close to the two kids and I put my hand between them. Like, so for example, if Roscoe was pulling at their hair, right? I'd get between them. I'd say, I'm going to put my hand right here. I wouldn't say, I'd say something like, I'm going to put my hand here. I don't want you to pull her hair. That hurts. I don't want you to pull her hair. And I'd keep my hand here. And that's that my hand is the no. So I don't have to scold because he's a baby. He's learning that pulling hair hurts. He didn't know that. He's figuring that out. And how is he figuring that out? Because when he pulls the girl's hair, she screams and he's like, whoa. And that's a reaction that like is intriguing. Like, well, that's a big response. Let me do it again. See what happens. Like, oh, it happened again, now louder. Like, whoa, this is interesting, right? He's learning that that is something that is painful to other people. He's learning that what he does can affect other people, other babies, right? So for a, you know, a 10-month-old to a 2-year-old, that's kind of where I'm at. Later on, it's more of a conversation like if Vigo, for example, when Roscoe was first born, um, if he would get too close to him or pinch him or do something, I'd say something along the lines of like, I won't let you pinch him and I won't let anyone pinch you. So that it's clear that I am protecting the baby and I also protect him. And I'm not saying you're a bad boy, or that's bad, or that's wrong. You know, I'm saying like, I won't let you hurt him and I won't let anyone hurt you. And I don't know, that's not like I didn't learn that. Maybe that's not the right thing to do, but I do that because I felt, especially when my kids' younger siblings were born, each one, that it's really hard. And whenever I would hear like, oh, Betty Sue just loves her little brother Johnny, I was like, really? Wow. Like I certainly saw moments of that with my kids, but it was also a really, really, really big shift. It's a classic joke, but apparently like it's if a husband and a wife were having a conversation and said, darling, my new girlfriend, Amy, is coming over. You're going to love her. She's funny. She's cute. You guys are going to be friends forever. You'll see. It's going to be great. And you're like, what? Right? So that's the classic example of it.
That's an excellent example.
Yeah.
I have very, very much enjoyed chatting with you, Annalise. Thank you so much for your time, for your examples, and for your stories that I will definitely laugh about later. Could you leave us with those 3 words, those 3 adjectives that you want to describe your kids?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, I should say I try and think back on them and I should think of them more often. Capable, confident, and empathetic.
Capable, confident, and empathetic. We shall
Yeah.
all strive to be that way. Thank you so much, Annalise. I have very enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.